Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. We sing these songs. Some of you may wonder why we sing these songs for so long. You know, up in heaven, this is going on 24/7, so get used to it. Number one. Number two, and I wrote these, I was writing notes down as this Ruach was speaking to me. We got to get brainwashed, folks. We got to get brainwashed. We got to get this garbage out of our brains. It's called the washing of the water of the Word. Ephesians 5:26. We are so thick and hard-hearted and stiff-necked, all of us, some more, some less, and we're getting better. This is not what I'm teaching about. Well, a little bit. But we've got to sing some of these things so we get our stinking thinking corrected. Amen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The moment somebody leaves, now that didn't happen here, but I've been in places where they leave. Oh, they're singing that song. Those people are hard-hearted and they're not open to the moving of the Ruach. Up in heaven, whole kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. This is going on all the time. Go read your throne room scenes. You know, Revelation 4, Isaiah 6, and Revelation of the other place, wherever it is. Yeah, Ezekiel 2. But it's going on. But we got to get brainwashed so that we be ready to hear the word, ready to get our faith built up and our doubt and unbelief sublimated.
Amen.
You know, this is really important. So it's good to be brainwashed in a positive way, to soften, like Dr. Joe was saying, the fallow ground of our hearts. Oh yeah, this is so that if any of you fall asleep, you know, I can zoom in on you and see if you're really snoring and not, and, you know, I can have somebody poke you. I hope you don't fall asleep, because I'm going to try to keep this interesting. And I don't always dress up in costumes. I usually don't, but today I am. And this is not just a play stuff. This is stuff that I wear. I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but on a fairly regular basis. I own a tree service. I'm a climber, but that's not what I'm focusing on today, because as you get on, as you see the rest of this, there's something else that we want to illustrate here, and I'm going to explain it here in a minute, and you will understand, because we're all of us are on a journey. Those are crampons. You don't climb mountains around here unless you have at least 3 basic pieces of equipment. Crampons, which go on your boots. These are climbing boots. I use these for climbing trees, but these are alpine boots as well. So you don't go into the mountains without a rope. Crampons, a good pair of boots, and your ice axe. I've got about 25 ascents of glaciated peaks around here. Well, not all of them have glaciers. A couple of our mountains don't, but most of them do. But almost all of them are over 8,000 feet. I've got 25 ascents. My family has been climbing the mountains around here since 1914. My grandfather was a famous mountain guide up on Mount Hood, and started his professional career 100 years ago this year. And it has continued. I'm a 3rd generation mountain climber. And so this is what a mountain climber will wear. And he has his gear back here where he can survive. And often we always take glasses with us, because sometimes we have to pick our route, depending on what mountain we're climbing and where we're going. But sometimes we have to look up there and see, okay, and many times we've had to do that. I started climbing with my father and my mother, and then the Mazamas, the mountain climbing club around here. And so this is why I'm dressed like this, and this is actually the gear that we use. And So I want to talk about this. So I'm going to get some of this gear off in a minute, but I'll leave it on to start with because, like I say, I've got my timer going, and my wife is going to let me know because I'm going to keep this to an hour by the grace of Yah, because I really want to have time. There are people that get touched every year when they come through and open themselves up and say, Yah, I want, just like the song we sang, I want more of you. We all need more. I'll talk more about this as we lead into the ministry time. If I can find my glasses, there they are. You know how that is. Where are my glasses? I know they're up here somewhere. Okay. Now, what I'm about to talk to you about today, I'm bringing what I believe is fresh manna. It is fresh manna. I've never taught this before. Done a lot of Shavuots, and you know, I don't like to bring stale manna. There's almost about 380 videos up there on the YouTube channel. I've got about 2,000 articles I've written on my Bible study blog, and about, 75 articles and several unpublished books that are out there. And if you do want to get the YouTube video, just either to Hoshana Rabbah. If you don't know how to spell that, it's Hoshana Rabbah, but you can just type in my name on Google, Natan space L. That's all you got to do. That's my business card, but it's not a business. But you know what I mean. It'll pop up my name, Natan Lawrence. Click on it. I'll be at the top of the list, or one or two, and just click there, and it'll give you a link to the website, to the blog, and YouTube video. Also, the notes that I'm speaking from today are up there. I posted them last night on my blog. I'm posting right off of my notes. It's published all right there for those of you that want to, you know, if you feel led to review any of these things. So, so there you go. So I asked Yah, what do you want me to speak about? I had to go all the way to Alaska to get the answer. I just got back with Brother Bob, my fishing buddy, and brother and Yeshua sitting back there. And I was given this. I was downloaded. It started last week while I'm sitting on early in the morning, getting up about 6 o'clock every morning, sitting on the front porch of a log home overlooking a bay called Little Port Walter, which is about 75 miles southeast or so of Sitka. It's only accessible by boat or float plane. In this case, we went in by float plane for some fishing and other things. And Yah began to stir my heart. But it didn't really come until a week ago, yesterday. We're out on the fishing boat. Now, we're not fishing. His son-in-law, or his son, is driving, Bob and Linda's son are driving the boat. It's his boat, and he and another guy were fishing. Bob and I were honoring the Sabbath. We weren't fishing, but we were sightseeing as they were driving up the beautiful coastline. We were looking at wildlife, filming, and I was in the cabin with my Bible, seeking Yehovah, and all of a sudden, it just started coming, and I pulled out my notebook and I started writing. And this is what I'm giving to you. I praise Yah. This is not from me, this is from Him. I mean, I'm the vessel. And I'm excited to share this with you, because this is going to tie everything all together, hopefully, what you've heard up to this point. And none of us knew what anybody else was going to be talking about. So, and that's great. That's how it often works. I'm calling this Attaining Spiritual Maturity in the New Covenant, on being a spiritual mountain climber. Hence the regalia, hence the what I'm wearing. So I want to talk about what it is to be a spiritual mountain climber. A spiritual mountain climber. And you've got some good pictures of me. I think I'm going to take this pack off right now. It's not light. Actually, this is my go pack that I keep in my truck all the time. I got stuff in there that, if I had to, I could survive. If I had to flee the city real fast, I could survive in the mountains with that, and with my knowledge of bushcraft and wild edibles. It would be a very lean existence, but it could be done. Anyway, so, you know, from the time that Yehovah revealed Himself to the children of Israel while they were enslaved in Egypt, He has been calling His people to be spiritual mountain climbers. spiritual mountain climbers. He first called the Israelites in Egypt up, called them out of Egypt to come up to Mount Sinai, there in the wilderness. And then from there, he called them up to Mount Zion in Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount was built. And then he called them even higher into the upper room. Now, we, as Dr. Joe says, we do not know where the upper room was and if that was the spot. But the fact is, I believe that I've been on the Temple Mount, I've overlooked the area, and I do believe that they were on the Temple Mount in an area that was probably called the upper room, overlooking, it might have been on Solomon's, what they call, I believe Solomon's colonnade or porch, and there were places up there, and right below that, all the mikvah pools, you can stand there and look at them below on the southern side, the Kidron Valley's over here, the Holder Gate is there, and they walked up all those steps. Any of you been there? Maybe some of you had. You walked up those steps, and all those mikvah pools that were excavated and opened up, I think in the 60s or whatever, they're all down there. I suspect that that's where it was. 3,000 people on those steps, and that was maybe that area's upper room. So I use that term colloquially, and I think it was higher because there's a symbolism here, and that's what I'm trying to focus on. So he called his people to Jerusalem, where the temple was established, and then to the upper room, even a higher place than that on the day of Shavuot or Pentecost. And now he's calling his people even higher to the New Jerusalem, which is, as we see in Revelation or Galatians chapter 4, is above us all and the mother of us all. Paul uses some very interesting language there. So this Jerusalem from above is the highest high point that Yehovah is calling us to. It's the highest mountain, the ultimate source of our spiritual sustenance, and the source of the river of life that flows from the throne of Elohim, and along which the trees of life are situated. We read about that in Revelation, I think it's either 21 or 22. And from this spiritual wellspring, the spiritual Jerusalem, comes all divine revelation and ultimately eternal life for the children of Elohim, or those that will be adopted into. We're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction. When we receive our glorified bodies by His grace, we will be adopted at that moment into His family. Paul used that term 5 times, adoption, and he's referring to being adopted into the family, because we were made in His image, and we will be like Him. We will be like Yeshua. We will not be equal to Him, but we will be like Him. Now, the beginning of this upward spiritual journey of Yehovah's people is memorialized in the counting of the Omer, which we talked about earlier today. That 49 days between Yom HaRishon, or the first fruits day, during the days of unleavened bread, the day after the weekly Sabbath, and 49 days later, and in the 50th day is Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost, which, as Dr. Joe said, means in Koine Greek, count 50. It's the 50th day. So this journey for the Israelites and for us began basically at Passover, or that time, Passover, Pesach, and Feast of Unleavened Bread, or Hag HaMazot, and continues, and that's a time of growing in spiritual maturity. And I don't have a lot of time to talk about that. I've done teachings on that before. But each step in this journey is a stepping stone. Each step higher to each mountain we come to is a stepping stone or a launch pad to the next. For the Israelites, the journey started at sea level there in the Nile River Delta area, there in northern Egypt. And it's flat, sea level. And that's prophetic in significance too. And they're in Egypt. Egypt is a metaphor for Satan, the world, and death. They literally worship death. If you've ever seen any, I was at the exhibit of King Tut back in New York City a few years ago. I mean, everything's about death. They worship death and dying. And it's really sick. And from that point, he called his people to climb higher and higher and higher until they reach, if they overcome, reach heaven itself, or like I say, the New Jerusalem, which is heaven coming here, heaven on earth. And that is the abode of YHVH Elohim himself. Now, the problem is that most people only climb so far in their spiritual journey, and then they stop. Some people they grow weary along the way, or they become comfortably complacent at the level they have attained, and they never move from that spot. We'll talk about that more. I'm just kind of giving you an overview of where I'm going. This is dangerous. To not keep growing is to die. It's like being in a river. If you stop swimming, you will float. It will carry, gravity will carry you down. You've got to at least tread water, and treading water isn't going to get you, like if you're a salmon, get you upstream to your spawning grounds. I was in Alaska, and we were watching the salmon, the steelhead spawning there at this place we were at, which is a salmon research station where the marine biologists, and we were helping them. There was one there, and they actually tracked the salmon for the government. It's a government installation there, a station. Fascinating to learn about this stuff. So to not move forward spiritually is to stagnate and die. YHVH wants his people, people that are on the move, who will obediently follow him wherever he leads, who are servants, who are bond servants, as Joe Sr. was saying. Look, a bond servant, when I used to be a preacher on the streets of Portland, I used to tell the people down there back 20 years ago, you're going to be a slave to somebody. You're either a slave to the devil, or you're going to be a slave or a servant to Yeshua. There's no in between. If you don't believe in the devil, you're a slave, and a slave to your master. You can be an atheist or if you whatever, but if you do not believe in Yeshua, Jesus, I used to say in those days, then you are a slave to the world of flesh and devil, which is a slave to the devil and to death. To not make a decision for him is to make a decision for the highway to hell, the side of death. It's that simple. So we're either going to be a slave in Egypt to the world of flesh and devil, or we're going to be a willing bondservant to the one who bought and paid for us with his blood at the cross. Amen. It's that simple. And the nice thing about that slave master is he loves us. Amen. He's not trying to kill us. So you may as well submit. Because it's either the highway to heaven, I use those terms colloquially, or the highway to hell. Take your choice. And I'd much rather be the slave of the one who loved me and gave his life for me. Hallelujah. Amen. So many people, Yahweh wants that people are on the move and obediently will follow him wherever he leads, and not stop and park along the way. But the trouble is, many people construct along the way. They get a spiritual revelation. They construct their monuments and their fossilized customs and their rituals and traditions. And the problem is, heaven is a long way above the earthly plane. But Yah is looking for people that will seek him no matter what, who have a heart to follow him no matter where and no matter the cost. Eternal life is a free gift from heaven. And it won't be given out easily. It costs nothing. But at the same time, it costs us everything. We got to lay our lives down. Yeshua said you got to lay it down. You got to give it all. You got to die to yourself if you want me. It's a priceless gift. Eternal life is a priceless gift. And YHVH Elohim does not give it out willy-nilly to just anybody. He's not going to immortalize people just so they can turn around and he can have another rebellion on his hand like he did with Lucifer. It requires to be like a mountain climber. There's the goal. And it is hard, one step at a time. When you're climbing up a mountain and your body and gravity are pulling you down, but you got to have gritty determination to get on top no matter what the cost. It's not easy. I've climbed a lot of mountains. It's hard work. You know, sometimes it takes a few hours, but I've done mountains where it takes 12 or 14 or 18 hours. You're up and down. It's a lot of work. And you got to pull out from within yourself energy and strength, and I'm in very good shape. Stuff that you didn't even know you had if you want to get to the top. And that's how it is with us in our spiritual journey. Now I want to explore a little bit about and talk about the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, and the two covenants, the old and the new covenant, and how this relates to our spiritual growth and spiritual journey as we're climbing that spiritual mountain. And I'd like everybody to turn to 2 Corinthians 3, and I'm going to read this. 2 Corinthians 3, 1 through 18. In fact, one of you alluded to this just a little bit ago. I'm going to start reading here. I've got all my scriptures here, and I'm just going to save time. I'm going to start reading. 2 Corinthians 3, 1 through 18. Do we begin again to commend ourselves, or do we need, as some others, epistles of commendation to you, or letters of commendation from you? This is Paul talking to the brethren in Corinth. You are our epistle written in our hearts, known and read by all men. Verse 3. Clearly you are an epistle of Messiah, ministered by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living Elohim, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of flesh, that is of the heart. And we've already heard about that. The brothers laid a great foundation for what I want to talk about. And we have such trust through the Messiah toward Elohim. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think of anything as being from ourselves, but our sufficiency is from Elohim, who also made us sufficient as ministers of the new covenant. We're going to come back to that. Not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. We're going to come back to that also. But if the ministry of death, we're going to come back to that one, because the church has really messed some of these things up. They don't understand what it's talking about. But if the ministry of death, written and engraved on stone, was glorious, we're going to come back to that and discuss it, so that the children of Israel could not look steadily on the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance, which was passing away, or I'm reading from the New King James, cleaned up. Okay, New King James, cleaned up. It's Hebraic. I substitute all the Hebrew words here. But so the word which glory was passing away, that is the Greek word kartageo. In the ESV, which is a decent version, I like that one. It says brought to an end. I almost like that one better. So if the glory which was brought to an end or passing away, how will the ministry of the Spirit not be more glorious? For the ministry of condemnation had glory under the quote-unquote old covenant. The ministry of righteousness exceeds much more in glory. For even what was made glorious had no glory in this respect, because of the glory that excels. For if what is passing away, Cartagena again, was glorious, what remains, either passing away or brought to an end, was glorious. What remains is much more glorious. Therefore, since we have such hope, we use great boldness of speech. Verse 13. Unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face, so the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away, Cartagena again, but their minds were blinded, for until this day the same veil remains unlifted in the reading of the Old Testament, or we would say Tanakh, because the veil is taken away in the Messiah. But even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies on their heart. He's talking about the non-believing Jews of that day. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord or the Master, the veil is taken away. Now the Master, or thinking about Yeshua, is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of Yehovah is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of Yehovah, or the Master, are being transformed to the same image from glory to glory, just as the Spirit of the Lord. Now, there's a lot in here. I'm not going to unpack all of this, but I want to hit a few points. I want to explain this passage to help us understand the transition between the quote-unquote old and new covenants. I'm not really comfortable with those terminologies, but you get the point, and we won't belabor that one. And we want to talk about the difference between the two and how it relates to us. Verse 7, I want to explain or parse out the phrase "was passing away" or "brought to an end." This phrase, is, as I said, is the Greek word Cartagena. Cartageo. I'm thinking of Cartagena. Colombia. My wife and I were down there when we were doing the Panama Canal cruise in February. But I'm thinking of Cartagena, but it's actually Cartageo. We'll get that. Katargeo. I'll get it if I just read my own notes. Katargeo is the Koine Greek word. It means to render idle or useless, to vanish, to abolish, to put away, to make of none effect. So what is Paul talking about here that was brought to an end or rendered idle? Now, those of us coming from most of you coming from a Christian background, you were taught that is referring to the Torah, the law of Elohim. But that's not what Paul is saying here. And so we're going to, just hold, what is he talking about? We'll hold that question in your mind. We will come back to this and discuss this in a minute. So we'll kind of tease you a little bit and we'll come back to that. Build a little suspense here. So verse 5, it talks about the ministries of the new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Again, is Paul talking about the Torah? Well, if he's talking about the Torah, then he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, because in other places he extols the virtues of the Torah and shows how the Torah is valid for us. And yet that's how mainstream churchianity reads this. And we'll come back, we'll discuss this too and show that this is what it's not talking about. And most of you know that, but this is part of the discussion, so we need to kind of cover this base. What Paul is saying here is that believers, I'm always editing as I go along, is that believers in Yeshua must mature from a letter of the law orientation or spiritual walk to both a letter and a spirit. Okay? If it was just a spirit, then we can worship any day. 1 and 7. How many of you have heard that one? If it's the spirit of the law, then we don't have to rest, because I'm resting in Yeshua. He is my rest, and I can do whatever I want on Shabbat. Well, if that's true, then it's all right to murder as long as I don't hate. I mean, it's all right to murder as long as I don't hate. It's all right to commit adultery as long as I don't lust. So that boat don't float. That logic doesn't work. And I think most of you understand that. That's the fallacy of that argument, which is institutionalized in Christian theology. Okay, I'm not going to belabor that, but we know that the letter of the Torah has not been done away with or passed away, because Yeshua says so on this Sermon on the Mount, between Matthew 5 and Matthew 7. It is not passed away, because he said, again, not only are you not to murder, but you're not to hate. Not only are you not to commit adultery, you're not to lust, and so forth and so on. Letter and spirit. And even though Paul doesn't specifically say that here, but in 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, he says, imitate me, or follow me. It means imitate as I follow Yeshua. So we know that he walked in the footsteps of Yeshua, did exactly as Yeshua said. Didn't mess around. He followed, and he did. And we know from his other writings, he followed the Torah, both letter and spirit. So I think we can make that logical jump. Now, I want to talk about the spirit of imbalance, gravitating toward toward the letter of the law approach. And there's too many people doing that. I was born and raised. I'm third generation in the Torah. My grandparents came to the Torah, the feast, the dietary, the Sabbath, all that stuff back in about 1952. My mother is 81. She's 80. No, she's 81. She was 18 when she came into these things. I'm third generation. My children are fourth generation. Been in it a long time. I was raised in a very legalistic situation. I had to go into the Christian church. I had to get baptized in the Spirit in my living room. Never been in a Pentecostal church in my life. In 1990, I got the baptism of the Spirit. Didn't even know what I was. And y'all just blessed and touched me. And yanked me out of there. I spent about 6 years in the 90s in Pentecostal charismatic Christianity. And then I finally exited all that. Came back to the Sabbath in about 96, 96, 97, and then left in that time we were in a Foursquare church, blessed them, but we left that in 98 and started a home fellowship in July of 1998 in our home, which then eventually we moved in to the Hall Boulevard Baptist Church in 2001, where we were there until October of last year when we retired. So I have seen the letter and the spirit, and I've seen the pendulum swing back and forth, and been there, done that, okay? So I want to talk from some experience as pastoring for many years, and yes, I'm on film. If we could hold, unless my mic, you can, but any questions or comments, if we could just, I want to hear what you have to say, but if we could just, and I'm sure you've seen too, our elder statesman back there, seen a lot. I'd really like to hear what you have to say, but hold that, and we'll come back to that. So the problem is that many people who have coming from the Christian background into a more Hebraic-centered spirituality, they gravitate overwhelmingly to the letter of the law. Well, how do you tie your tzitzits? And how long is your beard? And how do you exactly keep the Sabbath? And now they're debating, all the calendar issues and when is the Sabbath and the weekly cycle. And the last thing I heard was, well, do we, I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak disparagingly, but how do we, when we're counting the Omer, are we counting days? Hey, hi guys, my daughter and Ryan. How do we count the Omer? Are we counting weeks or days? Who cares as long as you get to the Pentecost? It's weeks of days. That's what Shabbatot means. But they're missing the whole spirit, and they're missing Yeshua. And we used to sit around for years after Shabbat in the church I was raised in, and we would discuss what kind of tuna fish is kosher or not, albacore tuna or whatever the other kind is. And I want to pull my hair out. Let's talk about the spirit-filled life. Let's talk about Yeshua. Let's talk about overcoming. And they never talked about it. Now, I'm not accusing any of you doing it. This video is going to go out to thousands of people all over the world. So I'm talking to people. But a lot of us have been there, done that. We've gone through these phases and these stages. But we gravitate toward, we want to know, and that's all right. We want to know what the truth is. But we don't want to park there and end up there where we become a bunch of nitpicking, heresy hunting, Pharisees. A bunch of legalistic people that then judge everybody who doesn't see it exactly the way we do. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So what Paul is saying here is that believers, hang on, we already covered that. So in our movement, there is we gravitate toward the spirit, the truth side, because we've been deprived of that. I get it. We've been deprived of that in our Christian churches. We're spiritually starved, and we've heard the gospel in the spirit, and so we run in that direction. The pendulum, swinging to the extreme. I get it, but we don't want to stay there, and that's for this reason. Because we camp over on the legalistic, the head knowledge side, as I think called Grandpa Joe over there was talking about, Joe Sr. I believe that's why there's such a lack of love and so much division and strife in the Hebrew roots or Messianic movements today. I think most of you see that. It's frustrating as a pastor for 18 years trying to help bring unity and harmony into the region. I just find my wife and I finally gave up. And it's crazy. And so there's an overabundance of head knowledge and Torah legalism and strife over the jots and tittles of Torah obedience. Now, I'm really big on righteousness and truth. But really, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, in essentials, unity. In how does it go? In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, I got it written down here.
Liberty.
Liberty, and in everything else, charity.
Yeah, good.
Thank you, Brother Joe. And that is really a good thing to live by. And we can disagree without being disagreeable. I understand some things, you know, if people are on different calendars, so that makes it very difficult. I get that. But we can still disagree without being disagreeable, okay? And not be fighting and trying to kill each other off. You know, my wife and I we were the first congregation in this region, if not the western United States, to adopt the new moon Abib barley calendar. And that was in 2000. But we never made an issue of it. I wrote the papers. My wife made the calendars. We collaborated with the people in Israel that were the pioneers in this stuff. We learned from them. But we decided we were not going to fight over it. We just led by example. And if you want to come and be part of the fight, if not, be blessed. Figure it out. And we refuse to debate. And it's really the best way. Amen. And if you're on a different calendar, we love you anyway. You know, when Yeshua comes back, he'll straighten it all out. But we're at least Shavuot's one day that most of us agree on, which is great when we can all get together. Hallelujah. Anyway, so there's an overabundance of head knowledge in our movement, Torah legalism, strife over jots and tittles, and Torah obedience occurring, but the love of Yeshua, the fruit of the Spirit, the gifts of the Spirit, the power of the Spirit is woefully lacking. And most of you probably can see this. And this lack of love resulting in division and strife was symptomatic in the Corinthian church also. And Paul was trying to urge them to come to the higher level, but they were striving and debating, and and they were sectarianism, and he called them carnal babies. I can't give you meat, I've got to feed you milk because you will not grow up. They even had the gifts of the Spirit, but they didn't have love. And as we were reading earlier, being taught, if you don't have it, it's nothing. It's zero, not a nilch. 1 Corinthians 13. Now there's a higher level that we're all to come to. And it's the Spirit and truth level that the Father is seeking. As we read Yeshua telling the woman at the well in John 4:22 and 23, but the hour is coming and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. Elohim is a spirit, and those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and truth. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So now let's talk about the new covenant. We're going to keep coming back to this. The new covenant, it's a higher mountain to come to than the quote-unquote old covenant. Both, as I said earlier, both a spirit and truth orientation will be the locus or the focus or the revolving pivotal point of the mature bride of Yeshua. We've got to do both the letter and the spirit. For those of you that came in late, the church teaches that we got to do the spirit. And as I said, and they apply that to the Sabbath. Well, I keep one day in 7 or whatever. If that's true, or I don't need to do the Torah because I'm resting in Yeshua. He is my rest. I don't have to do this. If that's the case, as I said again, to emphasize the point, then it's all right to murder as long as you don't hate. It's all right to commit adultery, the letter of the law, as long as you don't violate the spirit of the law and covet. Lust. And this can be applied to everything. No, those of us in the new covenant need to follow the letter and the spirit. So what was passing away that Paul is talking about there in 2 Corinthians 3? Well, I'm glad you asked. We're going to come back to that. So hold it out there. We're going to answer that question. What was passing away and what was transitioning from the old covenant to the new covenant? I'll just give you a hint. It was not the Torah that was done away with. It was something else. The Torah is more enforced. I would just say this. The Torah is more enforced today than it was then. Because a lot of those things that were going on back then were shadow pictures or signs that pointed forward. Hint. The sacrificial system, the Levitical system, the Yeshua, they were signs that pointed forward to that. And now that Yeshua died on the cross and He's our great high priest, those things are no longer, and now I'm giving away the punchline, but we'll come back to that and fill it out. And the Torah is more enforced today because we got the spirit and the letter. Amen. Okay? So anyway, we'll come back and fill in the details a little bit more. This is what the new covenant is all about. Spirit and truth. The mature bride of Yeshua will be walking in spirit and truth. As Yeshua told the woman at the well. That's what the Father's seeking. So this involves a Torah-oriented walk, which is energized by the breath of the Ruach of Elohim, the Spirit of Elohim. When the Torah is written not on stony hard hearts, but on the tender hearts that have been softened by Yehovah's set-apart Spirit. As we read already, Jeremiah prophesied that this would occur with the coming of the new covenant. When he says in chapter 31, behold, the days are coming, says Yehovah, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not according to the covenants that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says Yehovah. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yehovah. I will put my Torah in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 33. This prophecy was initially fulfilled when Messianic believers were cut or circumcised in their hearts on the day of Pentecost, as Dr. Joe pointed out in Acts 2:37 through 38, when it says, now when they heard this was after Peter's sermon, now when they heard this, they were cut to the heart, and said to Peter and the rest of them, apostles, men and brethren, what must we do? And Peter said, repent and believe in Yeshua. I want to just say, heart circumcision, which was, Dr. Joe brought that scripture out in the book of Deuteronomy. Actually, heart circumcision is talked about 3 times in the Tanakh. That is back there. This is not something that Paul came up with. That is back there. That was the ultimate goal of Yehovah. But it took the Ruach coming in and filling the people and being universally poured out. It was poured out individually to certain individuals in the Tanakh, quote unquote, dispensation. But it was poured out universally initially when Yeshua breathed, as Dr. Joe pointed out, on the apostles in Acts and John 20. But that's when they were born again, if you will. But they received the baptism, the empowerment of the Spirit on the day of Pentecost. And that's when Peter went from being a mouth, let's go fishing, to being a lion, and he roared, and 3,000 got got saved, and then they went out and preached the gospel and turned the world upside down. Amen. Yes. So this is what needed to happen. So this was an initial fulfillment of they were cut in the heart, and I want to say that circumcision in the heart is a progressive thing. We all need to be praying that our hearts be being progressively circumcised, that the foreskin, the flesh nature in our hearts die. We all have areas in our lives that we need to work on. So we need to continually be praying, circumcise my heart, circumcise my heart, circumcise my heart. When I yell at my wife or kick, am impatient or say something I shouldn't, or my wife yells at me or my children or whatever, circumcise my heart so I don't do those things, because that's some flesh that's still in there. It's an ongoing process, and I would encourage you as we go into the chuppah, do the bread waving ceremony, go through that. Ask Yah, circumcise my heart. Whatever, give me a fresh filling. There's one baptism of the Spirit, but the book of Acts shows that there's many fillings. We all need a touch. We need more. Boy, if there's anybody that needs it, it's Messianic and Hebrew roots people, folks. Yeah. Even those of us that come from a Pentecostal, charismatic, full gospel, spirit-filled background, it is a dry movement. Lord have mercy. I only have 10 minutes left? No. Oh, you're doing the 20 thing. Okay. Okay. And so, anyway, we got to keep pressing on. Our journey to this higher spiritual level of walking in both the letter and the spirit of the Torah with a soft, circumcised heart, as energized by the Ruach HaKodesh, the set-apart Spirit, started for each of us when we began our spiritual walk at our initial salvation, when Yehovah called each of us out of our own spiritual Egypt, at the time we were redeemed by the blood of Yeshua, the Lamb of Elohim. But Yehovah doesn't want his people to stop there. You know, the tabernacle is divided into 3 parts, and then you got the altar of the red heifer outside. There's actually 4 parts. Not really, but you got to come to the cross, which is outside. Then you get saved and you come in to the tabernacle. A lot of people stay in the outer court, but he wants people to go into Kadosh place, and then ultimately into the Kadosh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, where the glory cloud is, and that represents the bridal chamber. And not everybody's going to be the bride. There's levels of reward. Some will be the least, some will be the greatest. Yeshua says that in Matthew 5:19. There's many other scriptures we're not saved by our works, but our works determine our levels of rewards. To whom much has been given, much is required. If you are given much and you do much, you'll be given a higher reward. And it's how fruitful are you? Remember the parable of the talents. So Yehovah doesn't want his people to stop in their walk. The children of Israel had to leave Egypt, and they went up to Mount Sinai, and they got the fundamentals of Torah. How do they walk in righteousness? They just put sin, unleavened bread out of their lives. Now, what do? We can't just leave a void and a vacuum in our life. What do? We got to keep moving forward. So the Torah, they came to Mount Sinai, they got the fundamentals of Torah, and this is how we're to walk. How we are to love Elohim with all of our heart, soul, mind, strength, and our neighbors ourselves, which is the summation of the Torah. Paul says in Romans 13, love is the fulfilling of the law. The Torah tells us how to love our neighbor. We do not steal, we do not commit adultery, we do not steal, we love Elohim by keeping his Shabbat, by not worshiping idols, by not taking his name in vain, by not going to witches, by not having sex with animals, by living a set-apart life, treating our bodies as the temple of the Spirit, by not putting garbage stuff into our bodies, because we're the temple of the Spirit. Our diet, it's a whole lifestyle.
Amen. Yes. Amen.
After receiving salvation, we got to keep moving forward. We got to keep moving forward, loving Yeshua and keeping his commandments. From Mount Sinai, next, Yehovah calls his people to come up to Jerusalem or Mount Zion, and to meet him at an even higher level. Now, Paul discusses this and I'm not going to read this, but in Galatians 4:21 through 31, he talks about being under the law. Boy, there's one. The term under the law is used about 6 different times, and 3 different times out of those 6, Paul uses it with a different nuance. I'm not going to explain what huponomen means in the Greek. I have a video on that. Thousands of people watch it. I spent 2 hours explaining that, and I have teaching on my blog about that. But in this case, verse 21 of Galatians 4, it means he's talking about under the law in order to earn your salvation by keeping the Torah. He's not saying under the law in that we're no longer under the law, we can now go out and murder and steal, break the Sabbath and all that stuff. He's saying you're not under the law, you're not saved by your works, because the issue in the book of Galatians, as you all know, was about, are you saved by getting circumcised? Is circumcision a precondition for salvation? Not obedience to the rest of all the Torah, but circumcision. And circumcision never was a precondition for salvation. It never was for Abraham, who was circumcised, saved 24 years before he was circumcised, and Paul discusses that in Romans chapter 4. But the Jews in that day had made it a requirement of salvation, and is still a requirement to become part of your Orthodox synagogue and to be grafted into Judah today, down in modern rabbinic Judaism. And that was what the Jerusalem Council was all about in Romans or Acts 15. So this is the overarching principle of Galatians, the book of Galatians. The issue is not whether the Torah is valid or not. That never was the issue, but that is what the church erroneously has made it out to be. It's, what is the context? It's about circumcision. So when he says under the law, he's not talking about whether the Torah is valid or not. He's talking about whether circumcision is a requirement for entrance into salvation and to be grafted into redeemed Israel, or the Israel of God, or the Israel of Elohim, as Paul uses that term in Galatians chapter 6. And then he talks about the allegory. He says there are 2 covenants. He talks about the oneness of Sinai, and he likens that to Hagar. I hope you all know what I'm talking about, because I'm not going to read it. And then he talks about the covenant that's of Jerusalem, and he says we got to go to the higher level. And then he mentions in verse 26, and then he mentions the Jerusalem above, which is free and the mother of us all. So he's saying if we go back to Mount Sinai, we're going back into bondage. Yeah, but if we go forward to Jerusalem, we are going to the spirit of things. What on earth is he talking about? Is he like invalidating the Torah? Well, if he is, he's talking again out of both sides of his mouth, because elsewhere he upholds the Torah. Many times in the book of Romans, do we make the Torah void by grace? Elohim forbid. He makes those statements several times. Mount Zion, or the Temple Mount Jerusalem, wasn't the final stopping place for Yehovah's people. It was merely a stepping stone or a launch pad to an even higher and mature spiritual level. From Mount Zion, he is calling, Yehovah is calling his people to meet him in one accord in the upper room on the day of Pentecost. There they received, the believers received the set-apart spirit and the circumcised heart, and had the Torah written in their hearts, just as Jeremiah prophesied would happen in Jeremiah 31. We read that earlier. They were also there empowered to take the gospel message to the ends of the earth in fulfillment of Yeshua's great commission to help regather the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But that, even the upper room wasn't the highest mountain. What is the highest mountain? The upper room is not and was not the furthest or the highest goal or destination of Yehovah's people. But the Jerusalem which is above, that we just read about in Galatians 4:26, that is where the heart and the mind of every believer should be pointed. We shouldn't be focusing back on Mount Sinai, as glorious and as wonderful as that was. And that's where the Jews, the rabbinic Jews, they're still camped back at Mount Sinai. We don't want to be focused on the upper room, as wonderful as that is. That's where, to one degree or another, mainstream churchianity is. The evangelicals, minus the gifts of the Spirit, and the charismatics and Pentecostals with the gifts of the Spirit, and they're still focusing on that. You know, we need to take the truths of all these things, but go to the higher level without letting anything go. That's why I'm dressed in mountain climbing regalia.
Bring it all with you.
You know, we got to take it with us, and we need ropes and packs and crampons and eye sacks, spiritually speaking, to get us up there. That's the Spirit. That's Yehovah. That's Yeshua to lead us up that mountain. John, I'll get there. David talks about the mountain of Yehovah in, what is it, Psalm 15 and Psalm 24. And that's a picture of coming up. Okay, I might run about 5 minutes over. I got 15 minutes left according to my watch clock here. But I'm going to get through this as quickly as I can. So the upper room was not the highest. There's a higher one. It's the New Jerusalem. And this New Jerusalem is a picture of the Holy of Holies in the Tabernacle of Moses, the Kadosh HaKadoshim. And this is a prophetic picture of the wedding chuppah, which we have back there. This is the bridal chamber where Yeshua wants to have intimacy with his bride. That's under the glory cloud. That's where our hearts need to be focused on, pilgrimaging to that spot. This is the marriage bed. This is where Yeshua will cohabitate metaphorically with his people. This is the 5 wise virgins that have the oil in their lamps, the oil representing the Spirit and the truth, the Spirit and the Torah. There it is again. Worshiping in spirit and truth, the letter and the spirit of the law. They had it both. Not just the spirit like the Christians like to think they have, or the letter like the Jews like they think they have. You know, you got the house of Judah that focuses on the letter, and you know, they worship the Torah scroll, or so it seems. And then you've got the Christians, bless our brothers and sisters, but they worship, or they focus on the spirit. I'm just broad brushing, but to one degree or another. I mean, they have some of the letter, but they certainly overlook the feasts, the biblical feasts, the dietary, and the Sabbaths. These are the cornerstones of the Torah. So they do a lot of the rest of the Torah minus these things. These are very important issues, and this is what we all have to come back to be the bride of Yeshua. Not everybody's going to be the bride. So our spiritual walk is like climbing a mountain. I keep coming back to this. And like I said, a lot of people stopped somewhere along the way. And I already talked about that. The Jews stopped at Mount Sinai. The Christians stopped at the upper room. But we got to keep going. You know, look, they stopped at the upper room. And guess what most of them are doing? They're standing on the street corner waiting for the rapture bus to take them to heaven. Give me a break. There's a lot to do in the meantime. Okay? I won't get into that one. But that's not biblical. Yes, we're going to be caught up to meet him in the air, and that's called the catching away, rapturos. I believe in the rapture. It's called the first resurrection. But it's not going to happen before the tribulation, the great tribulation. Okay, that's a whole other discussion. We're going to go through a lot of things. We got to be refined. We're not ready, folks. Let's face it. Okay. So, it was common practice among ancient people in biblical times to situate their place of worship in high places, like on a mountain, so they get closer to their god or goddess, or to Elohim, if you were Israelites worshiping. Humans are no different today. All too often we have stopped in our spiritual forward growth and we park our spiritual cars at some high place, and it becomes a place of idolatry. Yeshua addressed this with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. Well, we worship as the Samaritans on Mount Gerizim. And he said that we do not, he said, you know, he pointed to Jerusalem. He said, look, there's coming a time when Jerusalem isn't even going to be the place. It's something higher. That's in John chapter 4. So again, he's intending us to look higher. See, the saints of the Most High must follow the glory cloud wherever Yehovah leads us, and it leads us, and it's leading us onward and upward. It rested over Mount Sinai. The reason I keep focusing on this is because too many of us are focusing on the jots and the tittles and the letter of the law. Yep. This is really the bottom line here, and we have swung clear back. And you go on these forums and these things on the internet, and people are spending all their time talking about the jots and tittles of the Torah, and they've let go of the apostolic message. The message of the apostles, folks, was not, again, I tie my own tzitzis, I know how to do it, I know how to do the Sephardic way and the rabbinic way and all this, but, you know, just wear them. Don't get all caught up how to tie them or how long your beard should be or exact. The apostles preached the message of Yeshua, and Torah was the undergirding and underlaid everything they taught. You can't understand the testimony of Yeshua or the New Testament without the Torah. You cannot. You don't even understand the lingo or the verbiage or any of that. But they were not focused on it. They focused on getting people saved and on Yeshua. And when you fall in love with Yeshua, who's cleansed you of your sins and washed you, guess what you're going to want to do? You're going to want to love him and keep his commandments. Yes. And you're going to follow the Shema, hear and do. You're going to do you're going to want to be with him on Shabbat. You're going to want to be with him on Feast of Trumpets, Day of Trumpets, Feast of Pentecost and all the other places. You're going to want to, my body is a temple of the Spirit. I don't want to defile by eating pork and swine in the garbage cans of the ocean and the garbage cans of the earth. I am set apart. It's a holiness that's set apart issue. I want all that he has for me. I want to be filled with the Spirit and share the gospel. I want to lay hands on the sick and they will be healed. Open up the blind eyes. In the name of Yeshua, not for my glory, but for his glory. I want to be going up to that New Jerusalem. I'm not looking for ways to get around the Torah. I'm looking for ways to do it because that is the heart and the mind and the spirit of Yehovah Elohim, and that has never changed. So now I'm just throwing my notes away. I'm going to roll with this. What changed? What was passing away? What was Paul talking about that was passing away? There in 2 Corinthians 3. What was growing old and passing away? It wasn't the eternal principles of the Torah which predated Moses and the rest of them. It goes clear back to the beginning. We all know that. Look, the law of Moses, quote-unquote law of Moses, was simply the pre-existing eternal principles of Torah that were codified in a constitution. The American Constitution is not new. They borrowed primarily from the Torah. They borrowed from the Greeks. They borrowed from the French. They borrowed from the English. They borrowed from the Magna Carta. And they put it together and came up with the Constitution. The Law of Moses is another way of saying Torah, but it's really the Torah in a codified form, in a constitutional form that was given to the Israelites who came out of Egypt as slaves and needed a national constitution that had a legal system, had a judicial system, had a religious system, a taxation system, all of these things. Medical, the whole thing. And so that became the Law of Moses. He didn't come up with it. He got it on the mountain and under the glory cloud. But the principles existed, and Yah gave him new revelation so that it could apply to the people, because his people had never been in that situation before where they had a country with borders. The patriarchs were nomads. They floated around. They weren't a country in that sense. That is the Law of Moses. And then when the children of Israel broke the covenant, yes, I'm going to go a little bit over, but it's okay. I got 6 minutes on this one. I don't know what you're looking at. I think I started mine 2 minutes earlier. Anyway, what was passing away was the sacrificial system and the Levitical system. Why did that have to come? Because they sinned at the golden calf. They broke the covenant that they said, I do. What was the covenant? The covenant was the agreement. The Torah are the terms of the covenant. If I buy a house from you, brother, and we have an agreement, I break the agreement, that doesn't invalidate the terms. The terms are still good. I just didn't keep my word and pay you the money I owed you. And yet this is where the Christian church has missed it. They blame Elohim when in Hebrews 8 it says the people were at fault because their hearts were hard and they did not keep the covenant when they said I do 3 times, once in Exodus 19 and 2 more times in Exodus 24 when the old covenant was ratified. So the agreement was broken not by Yehovah Elohim but by the people. And that's why he gave the Levitical system and the priesthood system as a schoolmaster. That was the law that was added. It says that in Galatians 3:19, the law was added. Not the Torah, it's always been around. That is the mind, the heart, and the character of Elohim. That is the light that shined in the darkness of the earth for the first 3 days before the sun and the moon was created on the 4th day, and it's the same light, the light of Yeshua, the Word that was made flesh, that will shine again in the New Jerusalem, and the sun will not be needed. He is the Son of righteousness. Malachi 4:2, his face shines like the sun. The sun shines like the sun. Say that 3-4 times in a row, real fast. Anyway, so these principles have always existed. So back to 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians 3, what was glorious about the old covenant? It was glorious because it was a law that no other nation had. It pointed the people toward Yeshua the Messiah. All the sacrificial system, all of the rites and ceremonies, the feast days, the sacrifices, and the Levites, they were the people. They were there to teach the people, to enforce the laws, to teach the Torah. They had this legal system, but it was not glorious because it did not promise eternal life or salvation. It promised blessings in this life. If you obey me, it was conditional. I will be your Elohim. I will bless you. You will be my people. But there's no provision for salvation in there. It pointed towards salvation, but it condemned. If you broke a law and you sinned, you had to bring an offering. You had to pay a price. You got lashed. You got killed, capital punishment, or restitution, or whatever, stoned. That was the ministry of condemnation. That was because you broke it. And so that was there in place until Yeshua came, and the writer of Hebrews talks about. That's what the whole book of Hebrews is all about. And that's the parenthetical, the Levitical priesthood that enforced this jurisprudence system, that enforced that was in place until Yeshua comes. That's talked about. That's in what I'm all over the place now. But I mean, it's in the Hebrews 7. That was the change or the transfer that Hebrews 7 talks about. It says there will be a change in the priesthood. It means transfer. It wasn't the law that was changed. It was this system. So that now you don't have to bring a lamb or a sheep. You now you have faith in Yeshua, and He washes once and for all your sins away. Now let's not take this lightly, this grace thing. Because if you sin and you don't repent of it, and you continue, the wages of sin is still death. Just ask, the church says, well, we live under the dispensation of grace. Oh, well, why don't you go talk to Ananias and Sapphira about that one? Who lied to the Spirit and lied to the apostles, and they got zapped dead. Look, there's still a lake of fire coming for unrepentant sinners. Let's not take this grace thing. Judgment is coming. There is a lake of fire, and all the unrepentant sinners will be put in there. We better repent of our sins. We better walk in fear and trembling. Amen. So we are ministers of the new covenant, both letter and spirit, and we are pointed toward the New Jerusalem. Okay, I covered that. I just want to hit this point real fast. Mainstream Christian theology understands somewhat the difference between the Old and New Covenant, but it takes some things too far and badly mischaracterizes some other things. It's important that you understand this, that we quantify this in our minds. The Christian church recognizes that something was wrong with the Old Covenant, because they can read what Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 3, that it was ministry of condemnation, and it was glorious, but it's brought death and condemnation. But the problem is they misidentified the problem. I alluded to this, but I want to hit this again. It blames the church. Christian theology blames Yehovah and His Torah for the problem instead of the stony hearts of the carnally minded, rebellious Israelites. Okay, now my timer's going off. Hang on there, I'm almost done. Okay, I did. Cancel. Okay, quiet. At the root of Christianity's misidentification of the problem was the virulent anti-Semitism of the early church fathers, who hated the Jews, most of them, and hated anything Jewish that looked Jewish. And I get that. I've done videos on it. I have the writings of all the church fathers, the anti-Nicene church fathers, in a 10-volume set in my library. I've read them. You can read what they wrote. And most of them hated the Jews. Constantine was the worst of the worst. In his letters to the Council of Nicaea, I mean, he spoke disparaging. You can go read those in the works of Eusebius, Ecclesiastical Histories. It's all there. That anti-Semitic, I call it anti-Semitic theology, was at the root of the hatred for the Torah that the church still has to one degree or another. And so Yah's calling His people away from that. And why do they have a hatred for the Torah? To one degree or another. I mean, I'm not saying they hate everything in Torah. The church still believes thou shalt not murder and that kind of thing. And that's good. But they hate the Sabbath and the feasts and the dietary laws. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Well, the bottom line for all antagonism, for everybody against the Torah, is two really simple, terse verses in the Bible. Jeremiah 17:9. Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? We can't even comprehend it. And then Paul says in Romans 8:7, because the carnal mind is enmity against Elohim, for it is not subject to the law, the Torah of Elohim, neither indeed can be. So Christianity in its apathy or even antipathy for the Torah is guilty in a sense of the childish defense tactic that occurs when one is caught in the act of sinning. They resort to the blame game. He did it. Or you blame somebody else for your own guilt. instead of taking personal responsibility. So in this case, instead of blaming themselves for their own hard-heartedness, or the Israelites, they blame Elohim. Oh, the laws of bondage. Oh, the law is too hard. Oh, the Israelites couldn't do it. And they blame everybody, and ultimately they're blaming Yehovah, which really is dangerous. That's blasphemy.
It is.
It's blasphemy. It's secular humanism. It's believing the lie of the devil that he gave to the Israelites, or to the Adam and Eve at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, when he said to them, hath God said, hath Elohim said. Has he really said this? You don't really have to do what he says. And that's the Babylonianism that Yehovah has told his people in the last days to come out of spiritual Babylon, of this mixture of truth and error. The church has a mixture of truth and error. They've got the basic messages of the gospel. They have basic, principles of morality, and there's good there. But then they have lies that the fathers have inherited, that Jeremiah talks about, traditions of men by which the word of Elohim has been made of none effect. So this is what we're to come out of. And right now, Yehovah, the spirit of Elijah, is going forth, calling the hearts of the fathers back to the children of the fathers, and they turn the hearts of the children. Last verses in your Old Testament, turning the hearts of the children back to the fathers, and that's what's happening. Back to the fathers of our faith, not the church fathers, folks, but back to the apostolic fathers, back to the prophetic fathers, back to the prophets, back to Moses, back to Abraham, back to Yeshua, the Logos, the Memra, the Word that was made flesh, back to the very beginning, back to the heart of the ultimate Father, our Abba Father in heaven. Hallelujah. Okay. So that's the change that took place. Hebrews 7:12 talks about. And so we got to keep going forward, higher and higher and higher, and we've got to just keep pressing on, folks. Transitioning from the old covenant to the new covenant, I'm wrapping this up now, is about going higher in our spiritual walk. Through Yeshua, as spiritual mountain climbers, we must be seeking to be constantly climbing higher in our relationship with Elohim. And on going from one mountain peak to the next one, as we already talked about, to reach one mountain summit and to bivouac there, there's a good mountain term, bivouac there, to camp out there when Yeshua and his Spirit are beckoning us to come up higher, and to stagnate spiritually, to become lukewarm, to resort to playing at religious games. It drives, as a pastor, it drove me crazy. I saw so many people coming in the door who just exchanged Sunday for Shabbat, Christmas and Easter for the feast days, and they were no more convicted or sold out. They're just playing religious games and just being actors. And as soon as they get tired with that, they're off in rabbinic Judaism, or they're off in, or they've just thrown it all away. Hey, we've all seen this. No, we got to come here because this is the higher level, and we're called to this, and this is the higher level truth, and we got to walk it out, like Grandpa Joe over there was talking about. And this is part of the problem of the Hebrew Roots movement. We have camped. We've kind of gone back to Mount Sinai and left the upper room, and we are not even going up to the New Jerusalem. And we're proud of it. Oh, we're trying to be like the rabbinic Jews. Or trying to be like this group, or trying to be like that group. It's like, the oracles were given to the Jews, so now we got to follow what they say about the calendar, or whatever. Well, if that's the case, maybe we should follow what they say about Yeshua. They don't even believe him, so why should we follow them? Follow them if what they say lines up with the Bible. If they don't, chuck it. It's that simple. I'm not beholden to the Sanhedrin that doesn't even exist anymore. I follow the Bible. And I love my brother Yehuda, but he's got to come to the cross, come to Yeshua, just like all the rest of us, and bless all of those that have. But they got to look upon him whom they pierced, and reconcile themselves to that. At the same time, spiritual leaders need to be leading Yehovah's people to the higher place in Yehovah, or else they're not acting as leaders. Sadly, the aim of too many leaders in our movement is to keep Yehovah's people in, just like in the Christian church, I'm not saying everybody, but too many of them, keep them in the stagnant comfort zones of men's religious traditions, whether Jewish or Christian, or somewhere in between, where their aim is to keep their sheeple fat, dumb, and happy, so that the giving units will continue to support the leader financially and enrich his life or her lifestyle. This is nothing more than secular humanism, greed, covetousness, idolatry, and the actions of hireling gospel peddlers. Shame on the lot of them. They will answer to Yehovah. Yehovah's people must flee these kinds of ungodly leaders who are not sheep after Yehovah's own heart, as Ezekiel 34 talks about. They need to flee these guys, and they need to continue their upward spiritual journey. Guys, this is our journey. We start at sea level, and we keep going higher and higher and higher. And we want to go forward. And I have there are a lot of people, I will just leave with this, in the Hebrew Roots movement that are getting sidetracked on the flat earth or Paleo-Hebrew or this calendar or pictographs or how you say the sacred name or how you tie your tzitzis or aliens or the book of Enoch or the book of Jasher. You know, there may be truths in some of those things or there may not be. Okay, that's a whole other discussion. But this is not what the gospel, what the apostolic writers were focusing on. They were focusing on Yeshua and pointing people upward because only He has the power through His resurrection to transform lives. And that still is our power. And we need to get locked and loaded with Him and go forward. And the rest will take care of itself and walk in the Torah and love Him and keep His commandments. And then by this all men shall know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another. And these signs will follow them. And the world will want that. They won't want to hear any more about the flat earth nonsense or aliens or giants or Nephilim. And there may be truth to some. No, I don't believe in the flat earth. Or polygamy. There's another one. I mean, he goes, we've seen it all. And Brother Joe Sr. back there has seen more than I have. I mean, you've seen it. But we got to focus on what they did. That has the power to transform lives. As Paul said, I am not, in Romans 1:16, I am not ashamed of the gospel. For it is the power of Elohim unto salvation to the Jew first and then to the Greek or the Gentile. Amen. Yes. Hallelujah.
He found, call upon His name. He is near, He is near, He is near. Yeshua Hashem Behir Matzov Keravu Yoto Karov Karov Yasov Rasha Darko Veishavim Machshevotav Yashovel Ad Hashem Yarbe His Yeshua Hashem Behim Matzo Keravu Yota Karo Seek the Lord while He may be found. Call upon His name. He is near, He is near. Yeshua Hashem Behim Matzot